The gunshot echoed across the vast expanse of the Texas plains as Abigail Johnson's horse collapsed beneath her, blood seeping from its chest. She tumbled to the ground, her own shoulder burning with white-hot pain where the bullet had grazed her. The thundering hooves of retreating horses faded into the distance as her former traveling companion's men she trusted disappeared over the horizon with her money, her supplies, and her hope. The year was 1875, and dying alone in the wilderness outside San Antonio was not how Abigail had imagined her journey west would end. The scorching June sun beat down mercilessly as she dragged herself to the shade of a lone mesquite tree. Blood seeped through her torn dress, and the world spun around her. She'd been a fool to believe that group of travelers would protect her all the way to her uncle's ranch. Instead, they'd taken everything she had once they were far enough from civilization. Time passed in a blur of pain and thirst. The temperature dropped as evening approached, and Abigail shivered. Her lips cracked and her throat parched. She'd survived 22 years of life in Boston, only to die in this desolate stretch of Texas wilderness. No one would ever know what had become of her. No one would mourn her passing. As consciousness began to slip away, the rhythmic sound of approaching hoofbeats reached her ears. Perhaps her betrayers had returned to finish what they'd started. She lacked even the strength to crawl away. A tall figure on horseback materialized through her blurry vision. The silhouette dismounted, approaching cautiously. A man with broad shoulders, his face shadowed beneath a wide-brimmed hat. "They left me here to die," she whispered, her voice barely audible as darkness crept in from the edges of her vision. Strong arms lifted her gently from the ground. Through half-lidded eyes, she saw a face weathered by sun and wind, with eyes as blue as a summer sky and a jawline firm with determination. "Then live for me," the cowboy said simply, as he carried her to his horse. Gabriel Matthews had been tracking a band of notorious thieves for 3 days when he found the woman. As a Texas Ranger, he'd seen plenty of their handiwork before: robbery, murder, and worse, but something about this victim stirred a protectiveness in him he'd never felt before. She weighed almost nothing in his arms. Her auburn hair, matted with dust and sweat, had come loose from its pins, and her skin was alarmingly hot to the touch. He cradled her against his chest as he urged his horse forward, whispering assurances even though he wasn't sure she could hear him. "Stay with me, miss. My cabin's not far. You're going to be all right." The journey seemed endless, even though his homestead was less than 2 miles away. Gabriel had built the cabin himself after 5 years of ranging, deciding it was time to have a place to return to between assignments. It was simple but sturdy, with a small corral for his horses and a creek running nearby. By the time they arrived, the woman was burning with fever. Gabriel dismounted carefully, keeping her secure in his arms as he carried her inside. He laid her gently on his bed, then hurried to light a lamp and gather supplies. In the lamplight, he could see her more clearly. She was young, perhaps in her early 20s, with delicate features and the soft hands of someone unaccustomed to hard labor. Her traveling dress, though now torn and dirty, was of fine quality. She didn't belong out here alone. What was her story? First things first, he needed to treat her wound and bring down her fever. Gabriel soaked a cloth in cool water from the bucket he'd drawn that morning and placed it on her forehead. Then, with as much propriety as the situation allowed, he examined the bullet graze on her shoulder. It wasn't deep, but it was angry and inflamed. "This is going to sting," he warned, though she remained unconscious as he cleaned the wound with whiskey and bandaged it with strips of clean linen. Through the night, Gabriel kept vigil, replacing the cool cloth on her forehead whenever it grew warm, and spooning small amounts of water between her cracked lips. She mumbled occasionally, lost in fever dreams, and he found himself responding softly, as if they were having a conversation. "You're safe now," he assured her. No one's going to hurt you here. As dawn broke, her fever finally began to subside. Gabriel had dozed off in the chair beside the bed when a small sound woke him. He opened his eyes to find her watching him, confusion and fear evident in her gaze. "Where am I?" she asked, her voice hoarse. Gabriel straightened, keeping his movements slow and non-threatening. "My cabin, about 15 miles outside San Antonio. I found you yesterday, out on the plains. You've been shot and had a fever." Her hand moved instinctively to her bandaged shoulder, and then to her throat. "Water." He helped her sit up slightly, supporting her back with one arm while holding a cup of water to her lips with his other hand. "Thank you," she whispered after taking a few sips. "You're the man who found me. The cowboy. Texas Ranger, actually. Gabriel Matthews." He set the cup aside. "And you are Abigail Johnson." She closed her eyes briefly, as if gathering strength. "I was traveling to my uncle's ranch near San Antonio. The group I was with." Her voice faltered. "They robbed you and left you for dead," Gabriel finished grimly. "I've been tracking that gang for days. They've done this before." Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back. "They took everything, my money, my luggage, even my mother's locket." "Rest now," Gabriel said, standing. "You're safe here, and I'll help you find your uncle once you're stronger." "You said something to me?" Abigail murmured, her eyelids growing heavy again. "When you found me, I said they left me to die, and you said, 'Live for me,'" Gabriel confirmed softly. "And you did." A ghost of a smile touched her lips before she drifted back to sleep. Over the next few days, Abigail's strength gradually returned. Gabriel made her broth from dried beef and wild onions, and later, when she could sit up, corn cakes and coffee. He gave her one of his clean shirts to wear while he washed and mended her dress as best he could. They talked during those quiet days of recovery. Gabriel learned that Abigail had grown up in Boston, the daughter of a successful merchant who had died the previous winter. With her mother long deceased and no siblings, she decided to accept her uncle's standing invitation to come live at his ranch. Uncle Thomas wrote that Texas was a land of opportunity, she explained as they sat outside the cabin on the third evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "After Father died, there was nothing keeping me in Boston." "Your uncle's name is Thomas Johnson?" Gabriel asked, frowning slightly. Abigail nodded. "Do you know him?" "There's a Thomas Johnson who owns the Triple J Ranch about 20 miles south of here. Good man. Married to a Mexican woman named Elena. They have 3 children." "That's him." Abigail's face lit up with hope. "My Aunt Elena writes the most wonderful letters. I've never met her, but I feel as though I know her already." Gabriel nodded, relieved. At least she had family nearby. "Once you're well enough to travel, I'll take you there." A shadow crossed her face. "You've already done so much. I have no way to repay you." "I don't want payment," Gabriel said, his voice gruff. "It's my job to help people in trouble." "Is it your job to take them into your home? To give up your bed while you sleep in a chair? To cook for them and mend their clothes?" Abigail challenged gently. Gabriel's ears reddened slightly. "No, I suppose not." "Then I owe you a debt I cannot repay." "Your recovery is payment enough, Miss Johnson." "Abigail," she corrected. "After all we've been through, I think you can use my given name." "Abigail," he agreed, the name feeling right on his lips. The next morning, Gabriel saddled his horses early. He'd decided it was time to ride into San Antonio to report to his captain and to see if there was any news about the gang that had attacked Abigail. "I should be back by nightfall," he told her. "Will you be all right alone?" Abigail was sitting at his table, sipping coffee. Her color had returned, and though still weak, she was much improved. "I'll be fine," I'm feeling much stronger. Gabriel hesitated, then retrieved his spare revolver from a drawer. He placed it on the table beside her. Just in case. Do you know how to use one? My father taught me, she said, surprising him. He said a woman traveling alone should know how to protect herself. He was right. Gabriel nodded approvingly. There's food in the pantry and water in the bucket. If anyone comes, I'll hide and stay quiet, she assured him. But come back safely, Gabriel. The way she said his name sent an unexpected warmth through him. I will. The ride to San Antonio gave Gabriel time to think. In just a few days, Abigail Johnson had managed to carve out a space in his solitary life. The thought of taking her to her uncle's ranch tomorrow, of saying goodbye, left him with an emptiness he hadn't anticipated. At 30, Gabriel had resigned himself to bachelorhood. The life of a Texas Ranger wasn't conducive to marriage and family. He was often away for weeks at a time, tracking outlaws through dangerous territory. The few relationships he'd attempted had withered under the strain of his absences and the constant worry his profession caused. But something about Abigail was different. Her courage in the face of what had happened to her, her quick mind, her adaptability to the harsh conditions of his Spartan cabin all spoke to a strength of character that impressed him deeply. In San Antonio, Gabriel first visited the ranger's office, where he filed his report about finding Abigail and updated his captain on the gang's movements. We've had word they hit a stagecoach near Fredericksburg 2 days ago, Captain Monroe informed him. Killed the driver and a passenger, made off with the strongbox. Governors put a $500 bounty on each of their heads. I'll go after them as soon as I get Miss Johnson safely to her uncle's ranch, Gabriel promised. The captain gave him a sharp look. Miss Johnson. Gabriel explained briefly about Abigail, realizing as he did so how improper it might seem that she'd been staying in his cabin unchaperoned. Best get her to her family quick, the captain advised. A young woman's reputation is a fragile thing. Gabriel nodded, though inwardly he bristled at the implication. Nothing untoward had happened between them. Still, the captain was right. The sooner Abigail was with her family, the better for her. After leaving the ranger's office, Gabriel visited the general store to replenish his supplies and purchase a few items for Abigail: a comb for her hair, a shawl for the cooler evenings, and a small bottle of rose-scented soap. Simple luxuries that might bring her comfort. As he was paying for his purchases, the storekeeper's wife, Mrs. Henderson, approached. Buying ladies' things, Ranger Matthews? She asked with poorly concealed curiosity. For Thomas Johnson's niece, Gabriel replied evenly. She arrived from Boston recently. How kind of you to do her shopping, Mrs. Henderson said, though her tone suggested she found it more suspicious than kind. Gabriel forced a smile. Just being neighborly, madam. He finished his business quickly and headed back to his horse, aware of Mrs. Henderson watching from the store window. Small towns thrived on gossip, and he'd just given her something to talk about. He'd have to get Abigail to her uncle's ranch tomorrow, before rumors could spread. The ride back to his cabin seemed longer than the journey into town. Gabriel pushed his horse harder than usual, an inexplicable urgency driving him. The sun was beginning to set when he finally approached his property, and a sense of relief washed over him when he saw smoke rising from the chimney. He dismounted outside and was about to call out when the cabin door opened, and Abigail appeared, a welcoming smile on her face. I was beginning to worry, she said. Gabriel was struck by the domestic scene before him. Abigail had swept the cabin, arranged wildflowers in a tin cup on the table, and something savory was simmering over the fire. You didn't have to do all this, he said, bringing his purchases inside. I wanted to, she gestured to the pot. I found some beans and salt pork. I hope you don't mind that I cooked. Not at all. Gabriel placed the package from the general store on the table. I brought you a few things. Abigail opened the package, her expression softening as she examined each item. Gabriel, these are lovely, but you shouldn't have spent your money on me. I wanted to. He echoed her words back to her. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition of the connection that had formed so quickly under such unusual circumstances. Abigail looked away first, a blush coloring her cheeks. The beans should be ready. Are you hungry? They ate together at the small table, discussing Gabriel's trip to town. He told her about confirming her uncle's location but deliberately avoided mentioning the captain's comments about propriety or Mrs. Henderson's curiosity. I can take you to your uncle's ranch tomorrow, he said as they finished the meal. If you feel strong enough to travel. Yes, I think so, Abigail agreed, though he thought he detected a hint of reluctance in her voice. I'm eager to meet my aunt and cousins. It's a fine family, Gabriel assured her. Your uncle has built a good life here. Like you have, she observed, looking around the small but comfortable cabin. Gabriel shook his head. This is just a place to sleep between assignments. It's not really a home. It could be, Abigail said softly. With a few touches, the implication hung in the air between them, tantalizing and dangerous. Gabriel stood abruptly, clearing their plates. You should rest. We'll leave early tomorrow. Abigail rose as well, moving to help him with the dishes. Their hands brushed as she took a plate from him, and Gabriel felt that same inexplicable warmth spread through him. Thank you, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. For everything. You're welcome, Abigail. They worked together in companionable silence, and when it came time to sleep, Gabriel insisted once again on taking the chair while she used his bed. Morning dawned clear and cool, a perfect day for traveling. Gabriel saddled both horses while Abigail packed the few belongings she had, her mended dress, now clean but still showing evidence of her ordeal, and the small items Gabriel had purchased for her. Ready? He asked as she emerged from the cabin in her dress, her hair neatly arranged. As I'll ever be, she replied with a small smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The ride to the Triple J ranch took most of the morning. They traveled side by side when the trail allowed it, talking easily about the landscape, the wildlife they spotted, and the history of the area. Gabriel pointed out landmarks and told stories of the early settlers, the conflicts with Comanche and Apache tribes, and the gradual taming of the land. It's beautiful, Abigail admitted, gazing out at the rolling hills dotted with live oaks and mesquite. Different from New England, but beautiful in its own way. It grows on you, Gabriel agreed. I came from Missouri originally, but Texas is home now. Do you have family back in Missouri? My parents are gone. I have a brother in California. He went west during the gold rush and stayed. We write occasionally. Abigail nodded thoughtfully. So you're alone too? I was, Gabriel said before he could stop himself. Their eyes met again, and in that moment, Gabriel knew he was in trouble. This woman, who had literally fallen into his life days ago, had somehow become important to him in a way no one else ever had. The Triple J Ranch came into view around midday, a sprawling main house with several outbuildings, corrals filled with cattle and horses, and fields of crops stretching toward the horizon. It was impressive, far larger than Gabriel had remembered. As they approached, a man on horseback rode out to meet them. Thomas Johnson was in his 50s, with iron-gray hair and the weathered face of someone who spent most of his life outdoors. His expression changed from wariness to surprise as he recognized Gabriel, and then to shock as he spotted Abigail. Ranger Matthews? And good Lord, you must be Abigail. He dismounted quickly, hurrying to help Abigail down from her horse. We've been frantic with worry. The stagecoach company said you never arrived in San Antonio. We feared the worst. Abigail embraced her uncle warmly. "I'm so sorry to have caused you concern. I decided to travel with a private party instead of the stagecoach, but they weren't what they seemed." Thomas looked questioningly at Gabriel, who explained briefly what had happened, omitting some of the more frightening details for Abigail's sake. "You saved her life," Thomas said gravely, extending his hand to Gabriel. "I'm forever in your debt, Ranger." "She's a strong woman," Gabriel replied, clasping the offered hand. "She saved herself as much as I saved her." Thomas insisted they both come to the house, where Abigail was immediately enveloped in the warm embrace of her Aunt Elena, a beautiful woman with kind eyes and a gentle manner. The Johnson children, 2 boys and a girl ranging from 8 to 14, gathered around curiously, eager to meet their cousin from the east. Gabriel watched as Abigail was swept into the loving chaos of family life, feeling oddly like an outsider now. This was where she belonged, not in his sparse cabin with its bachelor simplicity, but here among relatives who would care for her properly. "You'll stay for dinner, of course?" Elena insisted, her slight accent musical. "And the night as well. It's too late to start back now." Gabriel started to refuse, but Thomas added his encouragement. "Please, Ranger Matthews, let us show our gratitude." So he stayed, sharing a bountiful meal with the Johnson family and their ranch hands. Abigail sat across from him, now dressed in a borrowed dress of Elena's that fit her better than her damaged traveling clothes. She seemed to glow in the warmth of family, laughing at her cousin's antics and answering endless questions about Boston and her journey west. After dinner, Thomas invited Gabriel to join him on the porch for a cigar. The night was clear, stars scattered like diamonds across the Texas sky. "Abigail tells me she stayed at your cabin while recovering," Thomas said, his tone carefully neutral. "Yes, sir. There was nowhere else to take her, and she was too injured to travel." Thomas nodded slowly. "She speaks very highly of you, says you were a perfect gentleman." "I would never dishonor a lady in my care," Gabriel said firmly. "I believe you." Thomas puffed thoughtfully on his cigar. "Still, you understand that some might question the propriety of the situation." Gabriel tensed. "If anyone questions Miss Johnson's virtue because of circumstances beyond her control, they'll answer to me." Thomas chuckled, clapping him on the shoulder. "That's exactly what I hoped you'd say. You're a good man, Matthews." He paused, considering. "Elena and I have been talking. We'd like to offer you a reward for saving our niece." "No," Gabriel said immediately. "I don't want money for doing what any decent man would do." "Not money," Thomas clarified. "Land. The southeast corner of my property, about 100 acres with good water. It adjoins your current place, if I'm not mistaken." Gabriel was speechless. 100 acres of prime Texas land was a fortune far more than any reasonable reward. "That's too generous, Mr. Johnson." "It's Thomas. And it's not nearly generous enough for the man who saved my brother's only child." Thomas tapped the ash from his cigar. "Think about it. Having more land might allow you to build something more permanent than that cabin of yours. Maybe even start a family someday." The image of Abigail in a proper house, their house, flashed unbidden through Gabriel's mind. "I'll consider it," he said finally. "Thank you." When they returned inside, Abigail was helping Elena clear the table. She looked up as Gabriel entered, and their eyes met across the room. Something in her expression made his heart beat faster. The next morning, Gabriel prepared to leave. He'd spent a restless night in the comfortable guest room, his thoughts consumed by Abigail and the unexpected offer from her uncle. By dawn, he'd made up his mind. He would refuse the land and return to his duties. Abigail would build a new life here with her family, and their paths would likely rarely cross again. He was saddling his horse when Abigail appeared, dressed in a simple blue dress that brought out the green in her eyes. "You're leaving without saying goodbye?" she asked, her voice holding a hint of accusation. "I didn't want to disturb your rest," Gabriel replied, focusing on tightening the saddle cinch. "You need time to recover fully. I'm much better thanks to you." She moved closer, placing a hand on his arm. "Gabriel, I haven't properly thanked you for what you did." He finally looked at her, and the gratitude in her eyes nearly undid him. "There's no need for thanks." "There is," she insisted. "You could have left me there, or simply taken me to the nearest town and been done with your obligation. Instead, you brought me into your home and cared for me as if I mattered." "You do matter," Gabriel said, his voice rougher than he intended. Abigail's eyes widened slightly, and a flush crept into her cheeks. "Uncle Thomas told me about the land he offered you. I can't accept it." "Why not?" Gabriel sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's too much, and I'm not sure I'm meant for ranching. The Rangers are my life." "Is there no room for anything else in that life?" Abigail asked softly. The question hung between them, loaded with meaning. Before Gabriel could respond, Thomas called from the house, and the moment was broken. "Think about it," Abigail said, stepping back. "Please." Gabriel nodded, unable to trust his voice. He mounted his horse and tipped his hat to her one last time before riding away, feeling as though he were leaving a piece of himself behind. Back at his cabin, the emptiness seemed more pronounced than ever. Gabriel busied himself with preparations for tracking the gang that had attacked Abigail, but his heart wasn't in it. His mind kept drifting to her the way she'd looked at him before he left, the question she'd asked that he hadn't answered. 3 days later, Gabriel was packing supplies for what might be a lengthy pursuit when hoofbeats approached his cabin. He reached instinctively for his revolver before recognizing the rider Thomas Johnson. "Thomas," Gabriel greeted him, puzzled by the unexpected visit. "Is everything all right?" "Is Abigail?" "She's fine," Thomas assured him, dismounting. "Physically, at least. But she's been moping around since you left. Barely eats, hardly talks. Elena's worried about her." Gabriel frowned. "I'm sorry to hear that. Perhaps she's still recovering from her ordeal." Thomas fixed him with a penetrating look. "We both know it's more than that, son. The girl's fallen for you, plain and simple." Gabriel's heart skipped a beat. "She hardly knows me. Sometimes that's all it takes. The heart knows what it wants." Thomas glanced at the supplies Gabriel was packing. "You're going after those men who hurt her?" "It's my job." "And what about afterward?" Thomas pressed. "Have you given any thought to my offer?" Gabriel hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I have, but I need to finish this first. Those men have hurt too many people. They need to be brought to justice." "I understand." Thomas handed him a folded paper. "The deed to that land I mentioned. It's yours whether you want it or not. Consider it an investment in your future, whatever you decide that future should be." Gabriel accepted the document reluctantly. "Thank you, Thomas. I don't know what to say." "Say you'll come back to the ranch when you've finished your business," Thomas suggested. "There's a certain young lady who'd be mighty pleased to see you." After Thomas left, Gabriel sat on his porch for a long time, the deed in his hand and thoughts of Abigail filling his mind. He'd been alone for so long that the possibility of a different life seemed almost unreal. Yet in just a few days, she had shown him what his cabin could be, not just a place to sleep, but a home. With newfound determination, Gabriel finished his preparations and set out the next morning. The gang had left a trail of violence across 3 counties, but their pattern was becoming clear to him. They were heading toward the Mexican border, likely planning to cross at Eagle Pass. Gabriel pushed himself and his horse hard, riding from dawn till dusk and sometimes beyond. The trail grew fresher as he closed the gap, and on the 6th day, He spotted smoke from their campfire in a sheltered canyon. There were 5 of them, hardened criminals led by a man known as Scarface Wilson, wanted for murder in 4 states. Gabriel observed them from a ridge above their camp, planning his approach carefully. Taking on 5 armed men alone was risky, but he'd done it before. He waited until nightfall when most of the gang was sleeping, with only 1 man standing watch. Gabriel crept down into the canyon, moving silently through the shadows until he was close enough to disable the lookout with the butt of his revolver. The sound of the man dropping to the ground alerted the others. Gabriel positioned himself behind a boulder as gunfire erupted, bullets ricocheting off stone. "Texas Rangers!" he shouted. "Throw down your weapons." The only response was more gunfire. Gabriel returned fire strategically, conserving his ammunition. A cry of pain told him he'd hit one of the outlaws. The gunfight lasted nearly an hour, with Gabriel gradually gaining the upper hand as the gang's ammunition dwindled. By dawn, 2 of the outlaws were dead, 1 was seriously wounded, and the other 2, including Scarface Wilson, had surrendered. As Gabriel bound the prisoners, he noticed a familiar item hanging from Wilson's saddlebag, a silver locket on a delicate chain. Abigail's mother's locket. "Where did you get this?" Gabriel demanded, holding up the necklace. Wilson spat on the ground. "Took it off a pretty little thing we left for the buzzards a couple weeks back. Guess she didn't make it." Gabriel fought the urge to strike the man. "She made it, and she's the reason you're going to hang." The journey back to San Antonio with the prisoners was slow and tense. Gabriel remained constantly vigilant, knowing that men facing the gallows had nothing to lose by attempting escape. The wounded outlaw died on the 2nd day, leaving Gabriel with 2 prisoners to deliver to justice. When they finally reached San Antonio, the capture of the notorious gang made Gabriel something of a hero. The newspapers carried the story, complete with accounts of his brave solo pursuit and the dramatic canyon showdown. Captain Monroe commended him publicly and mentioned the possibility of a promotion. But all Gabriel cared about was the silver locket in his pocket and returning it to its rightful owner. After completing the necessary paperwork and ensuring the prisoners were securely jailed, Gabriel rode toward the Triple J Ranch, anticipation building with each mile. It had been nearly 2 weeks since he'd seen Abigail. Would she still look at him the same way? Had Thomas been right about her feelings? The ranch came into view in the late afternoon, golden sunlight bathing the buildings in warm light. As Gabriel approached, he saw a figure standing on the porch. Abigail, as if she'd been watching for him. She hurried down the steps as he dismounted, stopping a few feet away, her hands clasped tightly before her. "You came back," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I said I would." Gabriel reached into his pocket and withdrew the locket. "I brought you something." Abigail's eyes widened as she recognized the necklace. "My mother's locket. How did you—" "The men who attacked you won't hurt anyone else," Gabriel said simply. Tears welled in her eyes as she accepted the precious keepsake. "Thank you. I never thought I'd see it again." "May I?" Gabriel asked, gesturing to the necklace. Abigail nodded, turning so he could fasten it around her neck. His fingers brushed against her skin as he worked the clasp, and he felt her shiver slightly at his touch. "Perfect," he murmured as she turned back to face him. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, all the unspoken words between them hanging in the air. Then Gabriel took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about what you asked me, if there's room for anything else in my life besides being a ranger." Abigail's expression grew still, watchful. "And there is," Gabriel said, his voice firm and certain. "There's room for a home, for land of my own. For a future that includes more than just tracking outlaws and sleeping under the stars." Hope bloomed in Abigail's eyes. "What kind of future do you see, Gabriel?" "One with you in it," he answered honestly. If you'll have me." The smile that spread across her face was like sunrise after the longest night. "I will," she whispered, stepping closer. "I've known it since you found me, since you carried me to safety and told me to live for you. I want to, Gabriel. I want to live for you, with you." Gabriel closed the remaining distance between them, taking her hands in his. "I know it's fast. We barely know each other. But I've never been more certain of anything." "Nor have I," Abigail assured him. "Some things don't need time to be true." When Gabriel finally kissed her, it felt like coming home, a home he hadn't known he was searching for until he found her dying in the desert and carried her to safety. Thomas and Elena were delighted by the couple's announcement that evening. They insisted on hosting the wedding at the ranch as soon as arrangements could be made, and Elena immediately took Abigail under her wing to plan the details. "Are you sure about this?" Thomas asked Gabriel privately as they shared a celebratory drink. "Being a ranger's wife isn't easy." "I'm not staying with the Rangers," Gabriel replied, surprising himself with the certainty of his decision. "That land you gave me, I'm going to build on it. Raise cattle, maybe horses. Build something that will last." Thomas nodded approvingly. A man should have something that's his, something to pass on to his children someday. The thought of children, his and Abigail's children, filled Gabriel with unexpected joy. The weeks leading up to the wedding flew by in a flurry of activity. Gabriel split his time between his ranger duties, which he would soon leave behind, and preparing for his new life. He began construction on a proper house on his new property, with help from Thomas and the ranch hands. It would be ready by the time they married. Abigail bloomed under Elena's guidance, learning the skills she would need as a rancher's wife while adding her own ideas and abilities to the household. Her cousins adored her, especially young Maria, who followed her everywhere. Word of Gabriel's heroism in capturing the notorious gang had spread throughout the region, and many of San Antonio's most prominent citizens planned to attend the wedding. Captain Monroe had agreed to stand as Gabriel's best man, an honor that touched the ranger deeply. On the evening before the wedding, Gabriel found Abigail sitting alone on the porch swing, gazing up at the stars. He joined her, taking her hand in his. "Having second thoughts?" he asked softly. She turned to him with a smile that dispelled any doubt. "Not one. I was just thinking about how strange life's path can be. If those men hadn't robbed me and left me to die, I might never have met you. I like to think we would have found each other somehow," Gabriel said, squeezing her hand. "Some things are meant to be. Do you remember what you said to me when you found me? When I told you they'd left me to die. I told you to live for me instead," Gabriel recalled. "And you did." "I will," Abigail promised, leaning her head against his shoulder. Every day. The wedding day dawned clear and perfect, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of wildflowers. Abigail wore a gown of ivory satin that Elena had altered from her own wedding dress, with the silver locket now containing miniature portraits of both her mother and father around her neck. Gabriel, standing at the altar they'd erected in the ranch's garden, felt his breath catch when he saw her walking toward him on Thomas's arm. The gathered guests' friends, neighbors, fellow rangers, and family faded from his awareness. There was only Abigail, radiant and smiling, coming to be his wife. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt, with Gabriel and Abigail exchanging vows they had written themselves. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Gabriel kissed his bride to enthusiastic cheers from the assembled guests. The celebration that followed lasted well into the night, with music, dancing, and more food than Gabriel had ever seen in one place. He and Abigail moved through it all in a happy daze, accepting congratulations and well wishes from everyone present. As the night drew to a close, Gabriel led Abigail to his horse, their horse now. "Ready to see our home?" he asked, Their new house stood bathed in moonlight as they approached a sturdy two-story structure of wood and stone, with a wide porch wrapping around the front and a chimney promising warmth in the winter months. Gabriel had worked tirelessly to finish it in time, wanting everything to be perfect for this moment. He dismounted first, then reached up to lift Abigail down. Instead of setting her on her feet, he cradled her in his arms. "What are you doing?" she laughed. "Carrying you over the threshold," Gabriel explained, mounting the porch steps. "It's tradition." "You seem to make a habit of carrying me places," Abigail teased. Gabriel paused at the door, looking down at the woman in his arms, his wife. "The first time I carried you, you were half dead and I wasn't sure you'd survive the night. Now look at you, the most beautiful bride Texas has ever seen. And the happiest," Abigail added softly. Gabriel pushed open the door and carried her inside their home, the beginning of their life together. 5 years passed in what seemed like the blink of an eye. The Matthews Ranch, which Gabriel and Abigail had named Segundo Chance, Second Chance in Spanish, had flourished under their care. What had started as 100 acres had grown to nearly 300, with healthy herds of cattle and some of the finest horses in the county. The house had expanded as well, with additions to accommodate their growing family. Their son, Thomas James Matthews, had been born a year after their marriage, a sturdy, serious boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's quick mind. 2 years later, they welcomed twin daughters, Elizabeth and Margaret, who at 2 years old were already showing signs of the mischievous spirits that kept their parents constantly on their toes. Gabriel had never regretted leaving the Rangers, though he maintained close friendships with many of his former colleagues. The skills he developed during those years served him well as a rancher, and occasionally as an unofficial peacekeeper when disputes arose among neighboring properties. Abigail had taken to ranch life with a determination that impressed everyone who knew her. The refined Boston girl had transformed into a capable frontier woman who could ride as well as any cowhand, manage the household accounts with precision, and still maintain the warm, loving home that was the heart of their success. On the 5th anniversary of the day Gabriel had found Abigail dying in the desert, they sat together on their porch after putting the children to bed, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors no artist could capture. "Do you ever miss it?" Abigail asked, her head resting against Gabriel's shoulder. "The adventure of being a ranger?" Gabriel considered the question, his arm tightening around her waist. "Sometimes I miss the simplicity of it, just me, my horse, and a clear purpose. But no, I don't miss the life. This is where I belong." Abigail smiled, placing her hand over his heart. "Do you remember what I told you that first day in your cabin? That it could be a home with a few touches?" Gabriel chuckled, kissing the top of her head. "You were right, as usual, though I think we've done more than add a few touches. We've built a life," Abigail said softly. "A beautiful one." The sound of approaching riders interrupted their moment. Gabriel stood, shading his eyes against the setting sun to make out the figures on horseback. "It's Thomas and Elena," he announced, recognizing his in-laws. They weren't expected, something must be wrong. Gabriel and Abigail hurried down the porch steps to meet them. Thomas dismounted quickly, his expression grave. "What is it?" Gabriel asked, helping Elena down from her horse. "Has something happened?" Thomas nodded, his voice tight with emotion. "Word just came from San Antonio. Scarface Wilson escaped from prison during transport to Huntsville. He killed 2 guards. Gabriel felt Abigail stiffen beside him. Wilson had sworn vengeance during his trial, blaming Gabriel for his capture and the deaths of his gang members. "They think he's heading this way," Thomas continued. "The Rangers sent a rider to warn you." Gabriel turned to Abigail, seeing the fear in her eyes. "Take the children to the root cellar," he instructed calmly. "Thomas and I will secure the property." Abigail nodded, her initial fear giving way to determination. "Be careful," she said, squeezing his hand before hurrying into the house. Gabriel retrieved his rifle from inside and checked that his revolver was loaded. 5 years of peaceful ranching hadn't dulled his instincts or his skills. If Wilson was coming for him, he would be ready. "I sent one of my hands to alert the other ranches," Thomas said as they moved around the property, checking sightlines and defensible positions. "We'll have help by morning." "Wilson won't wait for morning," Gabriel said grimly. "He's had 5 years to plan this. He'll come tonight." They worked quickly in the fading light, positioning lanterns to eliminate shadows where an intruder might hide, moving the horses to the farthest corral, and ensuring all doors and windows were secured. Elena helped Abigail gather supplies and take the children to the root cellar beneath the kitchen, where they would be safe if the worst happened. As darkness fell, Gabriel stood on the porch with Thomas, both men armed and vigilant. "You should join the women and children," Gabriel suggested. "This is my fight." Thomas shook his head firmly. "Family stands together, son. Always." The hours stretched on, tension building with each passing minute. Midnight came and went with no sign of Wilson or any other threat. Gabriel began to wonder if the escaped convict had changed his plans or been recaptured. Then, shortly before dawn, a flicker of movement caught Gabriel's eye, a shadow detaching itself from the darkness near the barn. He raised his rifle silently, nudging Thomas to alert him. "I see him," Thomas whispered. "Just one." Gabriel scanned the property carefully before responding. "Seems like it. Wilson was always one to handle personal business himself." "What's he waiting for?" Before Gabriel could answer, a flash of flame erupted from the far side of the corral fire, spreading quickly through the dry hay stored there. "Distraction," Gabriel muttered, rising to his feet. "You deal with the fire. I'll handle Wilson." Thomas hesitated, clearly torn between helping with the fire and standing by his son-in-law. "Go," Gabriel insisted. "Don't let him burn us out." As Thomas hurried toward the blaze, Gabriel moved in the opposite direction, using the shadows and his knowledge of the property to circle behind where he'd seen the intruder. The fire was growing, illuminating the yard in flickering orange light that made the shadows dance deceptively. A twig snapped behind him. Gabriel whirled, raising his rifle, but he was a fraction too slow. Something hard connected with his temple, sending him sprawling to the ground, his rifle falling from his grasp. "Been waiting a long time for this, Ranger," came a raspy voice he remembered all too well. Gabriel looked up, his vision swimming, to see Scarface Wilson standing over him, a revolver pointed at his chest. The years in prison had not been kind to the outlaw. His face was more gaunt, the scar that gave him his nickname more pronounced, and his eyes burned with a manic hatred. "Not a ranger anymore, Wilson," Gabriel said, buying time as he assessed his options. His own revolver was still holstered at his hip, but any move toward it would be suicide. "Don't matter what you call yourself," Wilson snarled. "You're still the man who cost me 5 years of my life and put my friends in the ground." "Your friends were murderers," Gabriel countered, slowly shifting his weight. "Just like you." Wilson's face contorted with rage. "I'm going to kill you slow, Matthews. Then I'm going to find that pretty wife of yours, the one who lived when she should have died. Think I'll let her watch while I deal with those brats of yours before I finish her too." The threat to his family cleared Gabriel's head instantly, burning away the fog of his injury. He tensed, preparing to lunge for Wilson's legs, knowing he might take a bullet but determined to protect Abigail and the children at any cost. Before he could move, a shot rang out, but Gabriel felt no pain. Wilson's eyes widened in shock, and he staggered backward, blood blooming on his chest. "Get away from my husband," came Abigail's steady voice from the shadows. Gabriel turned to see her emerging from behind a tree, his spare revolver, the same one he'd left with her 5 years ago, clutched in her hands. Wilson raised his gun toward her with a snarl, but Gabriel was already moving, tackling the wounded outlaw to the ground. They struggled briefly before Gabriel landed a solid punch that rendered Wilson unconscious. Abigail rushed to Gabriel's side, her hands checking him for injuries. "Your head is bleeding," she said, touching his temple gently. "I'm all right," he assured her, pulling her close. "You were supposed to stay in the cellar with the children." "Elena is with them," Abigail explained. "I couldn't stay hidden while you were in danger. Not after everything we've been through." Gabriel looked at the unconscious form of Scarface Wilson, then back at his wife, this remarkable woman who had gone from a victim left to die to his savior. "I told you once to live for me," he said softly, cradling her face in his hands. "I never expected you'd save my life in return." Abigail smiled through tears of relief. "We save each other, Gabriel. That's what love does." By the time the Rangers arrived later that morning, the fire had been extinguished with minimal damage. Wilson was securely bound in the barn under Thomas's watchful eye, and Gabriel's head wound had been cleaned and bandaged by Abigail's careful hands. Captain Monroe, now graying but still commanding, personally took Wilson into custody, promising that the outlaw would never see freedom again. "You should have stayed with the Rangers, Matthews," the captain said with grudging admiration as he surveyed the well-run ranch and the family gathered on the porch. "You were one of the best." Gabriel's arm tightened around Abigail's waist as their children clustered around them, young Thomas solemnly watching the proceedings, and the twins hiding shyly behind their mother's skirts. "No, sir," Gabriel replied confidently. "I found something better." After the Rangers departed with their prisoner, life at Segundo Chance gradually returned to normal. The children, too young to fully understand what had happened, quickly forgot the excitement. The adults took longer to shed the tension of that night, but with each passing day, the fear receded a little more. One evening, several weeks after Wilson's capture, Gabriel found Abigail standing alone in the yard, gazing at the spot where she had fired the shot that saved his life. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "How different everything could have been," she answered honestly. "If you hadn't found me that day, if Wilson had succeeded last month. So many moments where our story could have ended before it really began." Gabriel turned her to face him, looking into the eyes that had captured his heart from the moment they'd opened in his cabin 5 years ago. "But it didn't end," he reminded her. "And it won't, not for a very long time." Abigail smiled, the last shadows of worry fading from her expression. "Do you remember what the minister said at our wedding? That love is stronger than death, more powerful than fear." "I remember," Gabriel nodded. "He was right." "They left me here to die," Abigail said softly, echoing the words she had whispered to him on that fateful day. "But I lived for you instead. I'm still living for you, Gabriel. For us." Gabriel pulled her close, his heart full to bursting with gratitude for this second chance they'd both been given. "And I for you," he promised. "Always." As the stars emerged above Segundo Chance Ranch, Gabriel and Abigail Matthews stood wrapped in each other's arms, their past secure, their present joyful, and their future stretching out before them like the endless Texas sky full of promise, possibility, and love that had begun with a whisper in the wilderness and grown into a life more beautiful than either could have imagined.